On today's show, you'll hear investor perspectives on the COVID-19 impact on the cannabis market. This is Investor Perspectives. I'm the host of Investor Connect, Hall T. Martin, where we connect startups and investors for funding. It's the time of COVID-19. Cannabis is currently gaining regulatory approval across the U.S. The lockdown has declared certain sectors, including cannabis, to be an essential service. We have investors and startup founders describe the impact of COVID-19 on the cannabis market. I hope you enjoy this episode. My first guest is Tibby Erdely of Key Investment Partners. Well, since the pandemic, we were in lockdown, investors are starting to ask startups if they're COVID-proof or is their business going to be disrupted by another lockdown. What does a startup in the cannabis space have to do to COVID-proof their business?
That's a great question. And it's a big reason why I think that our ancillary thesis is even more intact today, right? So these ancillary business models, a lot of these companies, they're your typical Silicon Valley tech investment, if you will. So they COVID-proof themselves already because a lot of their employees can already work from home. But what does that mean for a plant-touching business today? I think plant-touching businesses are, number one, going to have to do whatever it takes to ensure that their employees feel like they're being taken care of. They feel like they're working in a safe environment. So making sure that, employees aren't working closely together, that the shifts are staggered apart properly. If you're working on a cultivation site, that you're far enough away from the other employees, that you're able to come in and safely, speak to your boss or speak to your colleagues, however you need to. And I think that, simply put, as long as you continue to create a high quality, consistent product, you're going to continue to see repeat customers come your way. I think for those businesses that are manufacturing cannabis products or that are selling them, such as dispensaries, if you have not yet focused on e-commerce or shifting to delivery or figured out a way to enable curbside pickup, I think that you're doing yourself a big disservice. So I think it's those that are really, if you will, staying in line with the times that are going to be best suited to make it through this environment in this era. And as you put it, COVID-proof their businesses. But time will tell who are going to be the best businesses out there best suited to do this. I'd also like to say, to COVID-proof your business, there was probably a little bit of luck involved as far as timing because of that, capital markets environment that I was touching on earlier. You can probably deduce from that cash is really king in this environment. So for a lot of those companies that were able to raise, significant financing rounds pre-COVID, they're very lucky that they're sitting on healthy balance sheets, that they're now able to refocus on, again, profitabilities and efficiencies. I think that, focusing on that is going to be huge to COVID-proof their business and to really kind of bury their feet in the sand to make sure that they are able to weather this storm. I think for those businesses that were looking to raise capital, this summer or later in the fall, I think that they're going to have to, take a deep look and take a reality check in themselves and say that, things have changed, times have changed, financial projections have changed. And if they're willing to accept those changes, then they're going to be able to go out there and also raise the capital that they need in order to make it through this type of environment. But it's going to be those businesses today that are well capitalized that we think are going to be the ones who really make it through this the best. And it's going to be because some of the businesses that aren't well capitalized, they simply won't be able to raise financing, or they're not going to get financing at the terms that they want. And you're going to see them go by the wayside or see them get acquired by some of those businesses that are better capitalized today.
Well, that's great insight. In the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. What we've seen here, and I probably touched on this a little bit, is that there's been quite a newfound interest on investing in the cannabis space by institutional investors. At Key, we've heavily focused our partnership with family offices, registered investment advisors, institutional investors, if you will. And part of what we've seen in the past, call it 18 months or so, is that while there's a lot of interest in the space, there was a lot of hesitation due to a lot of the dynamics that I mentioned earlier. Simply put, that valuations have been pretty high. There is a renewed interest from those institutional investors, and I truly believe that there's going to be a lot of capital flowing in. We've experienced it ourselves at Key, signing up quite a few significant new investors into our fund over the past few months. And I think that that's not going to be something that is just happening with us. I think you're going to see that across the board. So I think over the next year, you should certainly keep your eyes and your ears open. I think that there's going to be a lot of consolidation that starts to happen in the space in form of M&A. And I think that there's going to be a lot of investment activity that's going to be backing the higher quality companies that exist out there in the space today. So then I definitely think that this is going to mark a very significant entry point. I think that people, again, are going to look back at 2020 as being a totally crazy year that we're all living through. But for the cannabis industry specifically, it's going to certainly be kind of a rebirth of the industry, if you will.
My next guest is Kim Rail of Azuka. So if we have to go back into lockdown again, and that's becoming increasingly obvious for some places in the country, what does a startup have to do to become COVID-proof for their business?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Do you mean in general or in cannabis in particular?
In cannabis in particular. Now, I know some parts of cannabis are online, e-commerce, others are cultivating, others are, building product. And of course, you have the workers, are they working remote, and you have automation, can you automate some part of your business? And how does the cannabis industry get into this COVID proofing of their industry?
So I think that the answer to that question is really, it gets back to fundamentals, right? Basic business fundamentals. Do you have a solid business model? Do you have a balance sheet to support, your company for the next, 12 to 18 months if things are really, really crazy? But I think the thing that's different now, from my perspective, to COVID-proof a business, that'll be an interesting term, is how important the trust factor is going to be for businesses, especially startup businesses, to thrive during this time. And what I mean by that is because we're not conducting business as usual, right? We're on Zoom calls. We're not going out to, cocktails or dinner with potential business partners right now. Establishing relationships where you have high trust in this environment is, I think, going to be the thing that every startup in cannabis needs to do. And that means high trust within your team, right? We're a startup, we're a small team, we're distributed. Before COVID, I was either on Zoom or on a plane. Now I'm just on Zoom. So, and we're a small team spread across New York, Colorado, New Mexico. We've had folks in Florida and Massachusetts. So we've managed virtually for a long time and have very high trust on our internal team. And I think we're continuing to grow through COVID in large part because, we have trusted customers and partners who know what they're going to get, right? They know that our products work. They know our technology works. They know we stand behind it. So I think that's what's going to matter. I think it's going to come down to, trust and follow through with the people that you need to work with.
My next guest is Scott Griper of Viridian Capital. Great. So during COVID, it shut down many businesses because workers were in quarantine, and it was changing the model for how you shopped and so forth. So what does a cannabis business need to do in order to COVID-proof their business? And how do you think that's going to impact the industry going forward?
I don't really know what COVID-proof your business means. I'm not sure that that's an achievable strategy. The impact is too damaging, not only from a business perspective, but for the health of your employees. So I don't know how you COVID-proof any business. But I certainly think the companies that have come out of COVID in the best shape were the companies that were either operating on a very lean basis, that were profitable, that were cash flowing, that weren't burning or losing a ton of money, meaning they didn't have to go out and raise capital to survive. They didn't have to go out and raise capital at very, very dilutive levels to survive. So the companies that had better balance sheets, that weren't crushed by over leveraging, over debt, too much debt on the balance sheet, that operated focusing on their core business, didn't make acquisitions of all of these far-flung businesses and technologies. Those are the ones that came out of it best for the reasons I just said. They were better able to attract capital because they were already producing cash flow and profits. So they were in a buyer's market rather than in a seller's market. They weren't desperate to take any kind of valuation that a capital provider might issue. And they were in a better position because they could bring back their employees faster once the stay-at-home orders ended, once the quarantining ended, because they were profitable businesses. They could afford to restaff. That's no different in cannabis than any other industry. In the history of business, I hate to be so proverbial, but it's true. It's axiomatic. Companies that have profitable, sustainable, growing, unleveraged balance sheets survive downturns better than other companies.
Well, that's a good point. Being stable financially makes a big difference in those COVID times when revenue may be uncertain. But I remember 6 months ago listening to a series of shows where basically the theme was robotics and AI, they're coming to take your job, be very afraid. And then when we go through COVID and the pandemic and the lockdowns and workers are in quarantine, they can't get there anyway. Companies that were automated and using AI were actually succeeding, Amazon being an example, where you're trying to reduce the number of people that have to come in and actually work on the product, and you can work in an automated fashion. And wondered if automation might be coming into the cannabis space in a bigger way to maintain the supply. To COVID-proof your business, your workers must be able to continue to work remotely, if not in a central place. Your customers must be able to continue to be able to get your product. And if you're selling them in a retail shop that's shut, that can be hard to do. It's a lot easier to do online. And if your supply is in a field that can't be harvested because the workers can't get there. And I'm wondering if COVID is going to change the supply chain in different ways because workers can't always get there when we're in lockdown and so forth. And of course, and so now the theme is robotics and AI are coming to save your business and secure your supply chain because your workers, are not the critical feature anymore. Robotics, AI, and these other tools, supply chain systems are really going to come and change the thesis. Used to be supply chain was just in time, not a penny more. It seems like that's shifting more towards robust supply chains. You'll never be without the product. You may pay a little bit more, but you'll always have your product because your supply chain is more robust. And wondered how that might play out in the cannabis space.
We are really just at the front edge of the adoption curve of AI and robotics in cannabis. Cannabis is very much of a labor-intensive field, particularly on the infrastructure side of growing, manufacturing, processing, distribution, and retail, the dispensaries, the supply chain, the licensed entities from seed to sale. Growing is very, very manually intensive. These plants are extremely sensitive to light, humidity, temperature, oxygen, nutrients, water. Manufacturing, processing, you've got to extract these oils with high temperature, high pressure, chemicals. You've got to clip the leaves off and you've got to take the seeds out. It's very labor intensive, not like Amazon, which doesn't make anything. They're a big fulfillment house. So it's not really a perfect analogy to bring up Amazon because, again, they don't make anything. They just ship, order and ship, order and ship. But your point does have merit in, for example, there is more AI coming into all of the systems that regulate the growing. So the HVAC systems, the heating ventilation systems, the air filtration systems, heating systems are now being monitored and regulated to achieve optimal environments and optical metrics. So there is some AI coming into these systems that are used for growing. That's where we're starting to see some of the first implementation of AI, not robotics just yet, at least we haven't seen it, but getting efficiency, getting optimization in the systems that drive a grow facility. we're starting to see AI being adopted and deployed there.
And my next guest is Ryan Dean Hogan of Moda Ventures. Oh, great. Well, you talked about COVID proofing your business. Can you tell us more about what you guys did there and what needs to be done to COVID proof a cannabis or CBD business?
Yeah, our operations, our e-commerce operations, we took quick action. We went to full remote work. And actually, our full e-commerce operations, which is about 40 people that's based in the US, is all remote work right now. And that's the operation that powers the e-commerce business. In terms of our suppliers, really checking in with those suppliers during the real, middle of the pandemic, we would do, and I would do this personally, we would do morning meetings with every supplier. And we had basically a 10-point checklist to understand what steps they're taking to make sure that they can stay open. We're not the actual manufacturer of our products. We buy from third-party suppliers, and then we ship it from a warehouse. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation because when you are in the entire value chain, you're able to control it. But with us and our tight relationships with our suppliers and the good work that myself and my team did, making sure that they were COVID proofing their business was important. And really, I think the biggest thing we did, Hall, was making sure that we have, backup 3-4 backup sources of suppliers, and really everything we do to make sure if something terrible did happen, that we would be able to continue to operate.
We saw that in many sectors during COVID, that there's probably going to be a shift towards supply chain visibility systems, more robust supply chains. We were on a just-in-time mode for supply, but it's pretty frail in a pandemic lockdown, and it'll probably be shifting to more robustness in the future as well. Do you see any tools coming in that help you with that? Is any new companies or software coming up to help do that supply chain visibility or that backup provisioning?
There's nothing that we're looking at right now, Hall, but it is on our scope for the rest of the year, is to have more details of the pipeline. We have visibility of, let's say, 4 to 6 week lead times of all of our products based on our projections, but look even further and deeper in the value chain. Being an e-commerce company, our forte is marketing and sales, but it is one thing that we're going to do more of now. And that's what I have learned through this experience is we need more depth and more understanding of our suppliers, long-term operations to be able, just in case something like this were happening again, or if we were to experience extreme growth, which we've been known to do.
My next guest is Ford Smith of Ultra Native. We saw a lot of businesses become disrupted by COVID. The workers are in quarantine. The supply chain is not coming through. Customers can't get out to pick up the product. So what does a cannabis company have to do to COVID-proof their business? What's specifically here going on that you would recommend to people to do in case we go to another lockdown situation?
If you're a farm, you're a manufacturer, you're a brand, you're direct to consumer, I'm not going to say it's business as normal. Those are the businesses where you're actually, people are boots on the ground, actually working in and around each other. So from some of the tours I've been on recently, it does seem like everybody's taking necessary precautions just in regards to distancing and wearing masks in the operations. I think that the focus, I would say, is these, you got to have some sort of direct to consumer strategy. You've got to be able to offer that delivery option. So yeah, I think that's the best way to COVID proof your business right now. I think the other businesses, they're somewhat safe right now because people are still buying cannabis through the online channels. But, brick and mortar, if you haven't done it, the writing should be on the wall that's your next best move.
See any disruption in supply chains? Somebody that did have an online business, but they just couldn't get the supply because the supplier was in COVID lockdown or quarantine or what have you? Or is there a way to COVID proof your supplier?
Yeah, there were in the early phase or in the early kind of like weeks of lockdown. Yeah, there was definitely this mad rush of consumers buying products, and then the supply chain almost couldn't bear it, It's since then leveled out. I mean, demand is still high, so the supply chain is kind of meeting demand. But no, as far as I've been concerned, or as far as my experience has been, just talking to portfolio companies, partners, and friends, no, demand is being met. The kind of COVID proofing of their businesses have been enacted, months ago. But I mean, I'm beating a dead horse on this one. The ones that I have heard that are, obviously struggling the most and are trying to find ways to COVID proof their business are the brick and mortar.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, be sure to leave a review, subscribe to this podcast, and share it with others. Let's go start up something today. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.